All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about an artist who looked at the art of his time and thought, you know what? It's just too clean, too polite, and frankly, too boring. We're talking about a rebel who dragged art kicking and screaming into the modern age with one single scandalous masterpiece. I mean, just look at this. The pure desperation, the muscles straining, the absolute chaos. This is not some neat, tidy scene from ancient history. This is raw, unfiltered human struggle. There's a term for this, neo-Baroque drama. And man, that is the perfect way to describe the revolution that was about to hit. And that really gets to the heart of what we're exploring here. What happens when art just decides to stop showing us idealized myths and starts showing us the messy, terrifying, and sometimes beautiful truth? Now, to really get to why this was such a rebellion, you first have to understand the empire he was rebelling against. And that was the Age of Order, a style called neoclassicism. Okay. So this right here, this is the poster child for neoclassical painting, Jacques-Louis David's The Oath of the Herati. Look at those clean lines, the stoic figures, the very clear moral message. Everything is stable, logical, heroic. It's like a perfectly staged, perfectly behaved play. So the key thing to remember is that neoclassicism was always looking backward to ancient Greece and Rome for ideas. It was all about reason over emotion, order over chaos. This was the gold standard. This was what you were supposed to do as a serious artist. But then, along came a challenger, a young artist named Théodore Géricault, who had a totally different idea about what art could and should be. And this is the showdown right here. On the left, you've got David's static, rational, posed world. And on the right, Géricault's cavalry officer. It's just pure energy, chaos, a moment of unbelievable action. You can almost hear the roar of the battle, can't you? Which one feels more alive? So let's just break it down. On one side, you've got neoclassicism, order, reason, the ideal, stability. On the other side, Géricault and the coming romantics are all about the exact opposite, chaos, emotion, the real, and motion. This wasn't just a minor disagreement. It was a full-blown rejection of the old guard. Yeah, Géricault just couldn't care less about painting Roman soldiers making dignified promises. He was fascinated by the world happening right in front of him, by its power, its violence, and its raw, untamed energy. And he found that energy everywhere, but especially in the raw power of horses. Just look at the motion here in the Derby at Epsom. The animals are barely even touching the ground. He freezes this moment of explosive action in a way no one had ever really done before. It's just pure speed and power. And it wasn't just about speed, it was about raw struggle. His paintings grab hold of this violent, untamed force of nature. This isn't the idealized noble horse of a king. This is pure animal conflict. It's a storm of muscle and fury that just felt more real than any posed statue. But you know, he didn't only find this truth in animals. He turned his gaze to people that neoclassicism would have completely ignored. The mentally ill, the poor, the people on the margins. Instead of painting flawless gods, he painted the haunted eyes of a real woman, finding this deep, complex story in her face. He painted these portraits with an intensity and a humanity that was just absolutely radical for his time. So all of these obsessions, with motion, with struggle, with raw reality, they were all about to collide in one massive, history-making painting. This is the story of the Raft of the Medusa. So instead of some old Roman myth, Géricault chose a subject ripped straight from the headlines. A French naval ship, the Medusa, had shipwrecked, and it was all because of its incompetent captain, an aristocrat who got the job for political reasons. The survivors were set adrift on this tiny raft, and what followed was starvation, murder, and even cannibalism. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a huge political scandal that made the whole government look bad. His process for creating this was just as intense as the subject itself. He started with dozens of sketches, just trying to figure out the most powerful way to organize this scene of complete horror and desperate hope. And he didn't just imagine their pain, he basically became a journalist. Géricault hunted down the actual survivors of the wreck and interviewed them, sketching their faces to capture the real psychological trauma they've been through. And this is where his obsession with realism went to a whole other level. To accurately paint the dead and the dying, he went to morgues. He literally brought severed limbs and heads back to his studio so he could study the color and texture of decaying flesh. It was gruesome, it was macabre, and it was absolutely revolutionary. And after all that research, all that scandal, all that obsession, this was the result. The Raft of the Medusa. It's like this pyramid of suffering and hope. At the bottom, you have the dead and the despairing. And then at the top, this frantic wave towards a tiny ship on the horizon, their one last shot at salvation. It's horrifying, and at the same time, it is breathtakingly beautiful. And to make sure you couldn't just look away, he painted it on a monumental scale. We're talking almost 5 by 7 meters. This wasn't some small painting you could just glance at. It was designed to overwhelm you, to pull you right onto that raft with those suffering souls. So, the painting caused an absolute uproar when it was shown in Paris in 1819. But its impact? Undeniable. It completely changed the game. So let's talk about that legacy. So what was Géricault's revolution, really? Well, for one, he proved that a current event, a political scandal from the newspaper, could be just as epic as any Greek myth. He took the suffering of ordinary people and put it up on a giant canvas, saying their story mattered. He shoved raw, messy human emotion right in your face, rejecting all those old stoic ideals for brutal reality. And by doing all that, he basically threw the doors wide open for the entire Romantic movement. When we look at this painting today, we're not just seeing a shipwreck. We're seeing a major turning point in the history of art. A moment when one artist dared to show the world not as it was supposed to be, but as it truly, terribly was. And that leaves us with the fundamental question that Géricault forced the art world to face, a question we're still grappling with today. Should art show us an idealized version of the world, a vision of how it ought to be? Or is its true power in showing us the unvarnished, sometimes brutal reality of the world as it is?